Hello, Miss Hartwig here. Today you will be listening to The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe. Please make sure you are following along in your text as well, as I will be adding my own commentary to the end of each paragraph in an effort to help you better understand the piece. Do you have any questions? Ha! You can't ask them because this is a recording. But seriously, if you do have a question, ask Miss Quinlan or Miss Hartwig now. Without further ado, The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe. For the most wild yet most homely narrative which I am about to pen, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet mad am I not, and very surely do I not dream. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world, plainly, succinctly, and without comment, a series of mere household events. In their consequences, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me, yet I will not attempt to expound them. To me, they have presented little but horror. To many, they will seem less terrible than Baroque's. Hereafter, perhaps, some intellect may be found which will reduce my phantasm to the commonplace. Some intellect more calm, more logical, and far less excitable than my own, which will perceive, in the circumstances I detail with awe, nothing more than an ordinary succession of very natural causes and effects. All right, so this first paragraph, we meet our narrator who, like so many of Poe's narrators, claims that he isn't crazy. He says that his story is going to sound crazy, but it happened, and it's just a series of causes and events. One important thing to note here is in, I think, the third sentence. He says, "But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburden my soul." So he's writing this story, and it sounds like he is telling us that he's going to die tomorrow, and he's writing down his story for all to know. From my infancy, I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my friends. I was especially fond of animals, and I was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. With these, I spent most of my time and never was so happy as when feeding and caressing them. This peculiarity of character grew in my growth, and in my manhood, I derived from it one of my principal sources of pleasure. To those who have cherished an affection for a faithful and sagacious dog, I need hardly be at the trouble of explaining the nature or the intensity of the gratification thus derivable. There is something in the unselfish and self-sacrificing love of a brute which goes directly to the heart of him who has had frequent occasion to test the paltry friendship and gossamer fidelity of mere man. So in other words, this guy is saying that dogs are way better than people. He appreciates animals, and he's always been really friendly with them. I married early and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. Observing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. All right, so in this paragraph, he's just saying, I got married, my wife was awesome, and she was totally okay with me having lots of pets, and she helped me find them. This latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal. He's talking about the cat here. Entirely black and sagacious to an astonishing degree, so the cat's really smart. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with superstition, made frequent allusions to the ancient popular notion which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon the point, and I mention the matter now for no better reason than it happens just now to be remembered. So in other words, he's saying right here that his wife had made mention that the cat was maybe a witch in disguise, but she wasn't serious. That would just be silly. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me wherever I went about the house. It was even with difficulty that I could prevent him from following me through the streets. So this paragraph, he's just saying that the cat, whose name is Pluto, was his best friend and followed him everywhere. One thing to note here that's special, Pluto, not just the name of the Disney dog, is also the name of the Roman god of the underworld, similar to Hades. So aptly named to be a little bit evil. Next paragraph. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, through the instrumentality of the fiend intemperance, had I blushed to confess it, experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered myself to use intemperate language to my wife. At length, I even proffered her personal violence. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected, but ill-used them. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, as I made no scruple of maltreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog, when by accident or through affection they came in my way. But my disease grew upon me, for what disease is like alcohol? And at length even Pluto, who was now becoming old, and consequently somewhat peevish, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my ill temper. All right, we knew that this was coming, that the nice story was going to get evil at some point. Our narrator has begun to drink a lot, and because he is constantly because he's constantly drunk, he is being cruel to his animals, and he even says that he used intemperate language to his wife, meaning he yelled at her, possibly cursed at her. He makes two references to alcohol. He first calls it the fiend intemperance. Temperance means that you are keeping away from alcohol, so intemperance means not temperate, so he's drinking a lot. He's treating it like it's a kind of disease. He says at first he wasn't mean to Pluto, he was mean to everybody else, but Pluto was something he was still good to. But here, even at the end of the paragraph, he says that even poor Pluto has begun to experience his mean moods. Next paragraph. One night, returning home much intoxicated from one of my haunts about town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him when, in his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take its flight from my body, and a more than fiendish malevolence, gin-nurtured, thrilled every fiber of my frame. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. I blush, I burn, I shudder while I pen the damnable atrocity. All right, so things have escalated quickly. One night, our narrator comes home drunk, and he feels like the cat is avoiding him on purpose, so he chases the cat down, and the cat, scared, bites him. Because he's upset that he just has been bit and he's drunk, he decides to snatch out a knife from his pocket and cut out the cat's eye. Gross, right? Next paragraph. When reason returned with the morning, when I had slept off the fumes of last night's debauch, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse for the crime which I had been guilty. But it was, at best, a feeble and equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I again plunged into excess and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. So he says here basically that after he sobered up the next morning, he had a sentiment of horror and feeling bad. But he said the feeling wasn't really that bad, and that his soul remained untouched, meaning he didn't feel so terrible about it that he needed to go to church to pray for his sins or anything. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented, it is true, a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but, as might be expected, fled in extreme terror at my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to be at first grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. But this feeling soon gave place to irritation, and then came, as if to my final and irrevocable overthrow, the spirit of perverseness. Now, perverseness here, notice that it's all in caps. If you are perverse, if you're being perverse, it means that you're willingly acting the opposite way that you should. So he has this whole spirit, this whole feeling that he should be acting opposite of what he knows to be right. Continuing, of this spirit philosophy takes no account. Yet I am not more sure that my soul lives than I am that the perverseness is one of the primitive impulses of the human heart, one of the indivisible primary faculties or sentiments which give direction to the character of man. Who has not 100 times found himself committing a vile or stupid action for no other reason than because he knows that he should not? Have we not a perpetual inclination in the teeth of our best judgment to violate that which is law merely because we understand it to be such? This spirit of perverseness, I say, came to my final overthrow. It was this unfathomable longing of the soul to vex itself, to offer violence to its own nature, to do wrong for the wrong's sake only, that urged me to continue and finally to consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the offending brute. So in other words, we're going to pause right here. In other words, he's saying that he has to do some action just because in his soul he feels like he needs to do wrong. It's almost like you shouldn't press a button, but it's so tempting that you have to press it. It's like you have to do something wrong just for the heck of it. He felt, in other words, like he had to hurt the cat again, even though it made no sense. So, moving on. One morning, in cold blood, I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it from the limb of a tree, hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse at my heart. Hung it because I knew it had loved me, and because I felt it had given me no reason of offense. Hung it because I knew in doing so I was committing a sin, a deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. Okay, so remember here at the beginning, we know that our narrator loves animals. He's the type of person who would say that cruelty to a dog is worse than cruelty to a person. So here, when he is deliberately hanging his cat, knowing it's totally wrong, crying because he knows it's wrong, he's saying he even understands that God cannot even forgive him at this point because this act is so heinous. Next paragraph. On the night of the final day on which this most cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the conflagration. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself thenceforward to despair. So oddly enough, the same day that he had hung his cat, that night his house all of a sudden is on fire. Keep in mind that reference that his wife was making to the cat possibly being a witch. Next paragraph. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect between the disaster and the atrocity. But I am detailing a chain of facts and wish not to leave a possible link imperfect. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found in a compartment wall, not very thick, which stood about the middle of the house and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plastering had here, in great measure, resisted the action of the fire, a fact which I attributed to it having been recently spread. In other words, the wall had just been put up and replastered. About this wall a dense crowd were collected, and many persons seemed to be examining a particular portion of it with very minute and eager attention. The words strange, singular, and other similar expressions excited my curiosity. I approached and saw, as if graven in bas relief upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. The impression was given with an accuracy truly marvelous. There was a rope about the animal's neck. Oh, so our narrator has this fire. The next day he goes back and he notices one wall, the wall against where his bed was, has this kind of impression of a cat, and the cat has a rope